What if we could unlock the wisdom and aspiration to life's opportunities and challenge with a conversation? Hello, I'm Chief Efi Bell. I'm your guide and host, and I want to welcome you to Uncommon Conversations. Today, in honor of Black History Month, we're talking with Black thought leaders from across the globe. The series is called Black Legacy Architects Uncommon Conversations of Wisdom and Aspiration. We're going to delve into the essence of legacy. We're going to explore this through the metaphor the legs of legacy stand on the shoulders of giants, embodying the tension and the opportunity between leveraging our rich heritage and forging a future path for our collective legacy. So, I want to welcome our guests today. Each of our guests embodies two critical roles in this process. They're either the legs of the legacy, meaning they're actively shaping the present and the future, or they are the shoulders of giants, which means that the legs stand on those who have paved the way, especially women who have contributed significantly. Perhaps they're both or one and the same. In this movement of fostering a thriving ecosystem of Black legacy across the globe. So I want to do a warm welcome to our guest. Again, they're here with us, and I'm thrilled about this conversation today. So let's jump into our first question, ladies. So to kick off things, I want to ask you to introduce yourselves, share your name, your city that you're located in, your age, your favorite ice cream flavor, what you're passionate about, and a quote that speaks to you about your view of Black legacy. So, Joya, I'll invite you to go first.
Thank you, Chief. My name is Joya Johnson. I am 33 years old. I currently reside in Cincinnati, Ohio, but I was born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky. Derby City. My favorite ice cream is cookies and cream or Superman. And you asked for a quote on how I see Black legacy. And so one of my favorites comes from Nelson Mandela, and it always seems impossible until it's done. And that just speaks volume to me through a lot of trials and tribulations and obstacles that I've overcome and all the things that I didn't think would happen. And when I look at just Black history and the history that I'm currently creating for those that come after me, it's the things that I could have never seen myself doing. So taking the moment to look at how far I've come and what I didn't think I would do and where I didn't think I would be, but where I actually am.
Thank you and welcome. Miss Carol.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carol Tungmack. I live here in Cincinnati. I am originally from an island in the Caribbean, Antigua, but I've lived in the US for a very long time. I grew up in New York City. You asked about a quote, and the quote that I have is the quote that I also have on my signature on my email account, which is, "A people without the knowledge of the past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots." And that's a quote by Marcus Garvey. And so I'm just really excited to be here to be part of this conversation, especially about legacy, because I think sometimes that's one of the things that we're missing, and just missing using the words so that we know how to move forward. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you both. I can tell already just from your introductions and your quotes that we've got a wealth of knowledge, experience, and that good stuff in this room today. So let's pivot to our first major question, where we're going to explore the personal and communal aspects of legacy. So when I was a young adult, and probably when I was a child, I can remember my grandmother telling these stories where she highlighted the sacrifice that she made for her future generations, right? She wanted to be a nurse, and she was telling me that for her, she decided to pursue motherhood so that her children could stand on her shoulders and pursue their dreams. And so, as I became a young adult and a parent, that became more clear for me and better understood it. And recently, in the last few years, I've kind of mused over that gift and that of sacrifice that she gave. And from that, I birthed this metaphor around the legs of legacy standing on the shoulders of giants. And so, reflecting on that, do you see yourself as the legs of legacy, or do you see yourself as a giant, and why?
I can go first on that one. When I initially heard about it or read it, I wasn't quite sure where I fit, but I am certain that I am the legs of legacy. I certainly stand on the shoulders of our ancestors. And the most recent for me would be my grandmother, who passed away about 21 years ago. And so, well, no, almost 23 years ago now. And so, the sacrifices she has made, as well as my mother, who's an immigrant to this country. She's currently a maid in New York City. And I tell people all the time, her maid money made me who I am today. And so I certainly stand on her shoulders, stand on the shoulders of my aunties, who are alive, because without them making those sacrifices that they did in the past, there's just no way that I could imagine doing the things that I'm doing now. But also legacy moving forward, meaning like hopefully my children, my nieces, and I don't have any nephews, but my nieces see that, okay, here's some legs of legacy. They too can look at legs, become legs themselves, but also become giants to the future generation.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
I think for me, it was easy to say legs of legacy simply because of my age, and I'm usually the youngest in it, or I'm the baby of the group. And so I do feel like that I haven't established as a giant, but then the more I think about it and the work that I do and the things that I'm passionate about, I feel like it's situational. So I work in youth development. I've been in youth development for as long as I like to say I've had a big girl job. And so for me, I think to those that are coming after me and especially the young women and the young Black women that I work with, I am the giant for them to become the legacies. And so I hold true to that and hold very passionate, but I'm also humbly and gratefully thankful to those that were the giants for me that I'm able to be the legs for. So I think it's very situational. If I had to hone in on one and identify, I would say I'm a leg of legacy.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you both said, and I'll have to, pull on Carol just a little bit and poke at her. But we were on vacation together recently, and I'm gonna have to tell you, she was my giant. I had to stand on her shoulders during that trip because she really helped me to embrace self-care in a new way and like see it differently and to hold those boundaries. And so I totally agree with you, Joy. Like it's situational. And it's not age based and it's not necessarily experience. It is experience based, but it's not restrictive. And so, I think it's also thinking about, when you think about yourself as an architect, right, of Black legacy, right, whether you're the legs in that moment or whether you're a giant in that moment, how do you define your role or how do you see your role or your contribution in shaping Black legacy as either the legs or the giant?
That is a really hard question. I mean, it is a very, very difficult question because I think as you're shaping anything and when you're the architect of something, it's so hard, right? Because you're going to make mistakes. You don't know how to do it. That's why you're the architect. You're building as you go. And for me, I also want my nieces, and my cousins and family members to see that architects make mistakes. I think, I'm not building, yes, figuratively, I'm not literally building a bridge, but it is like a bridge, right? And if you think of civil engineers now, right, when they build bridges, they have these mathematical equations that they do. They try not to make any mistakes. We hope they don't make any mistakes because we drive over the bridges, on a regular basis. But I would say 5 years later, 10 years later, sometimes they're like, well, we have to fix the bridge because this thing isn't working. That part isn't working. And I think it's the same thing for us. It's okay to say 5 years from now, looking back, I made a mistake or I should have done this other thing differently. And so I think for me as an architect, it's so important to let the future generation know, as you're building, you will make mistakes. But when you do realize you've made a mistake, how do you go back and say, how do I patch this up? How do I fix this? How do I take this to the next level so that the mistake is not going to be 5 years out, maybe it's 20 years out. You're like, you know what, we need to fix the bridge now 20 years later and not 5 years later. And so I would say that it's very difficult to be an architect, but somebody has to start it. Somebody has to do it. But if not you, then who? Who's going to do it? Because if we wait, then it may not happen.
And if not
It
now,
may not happen. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think also just going off of what you said is being able to be transparent and not knowing and not having all the answers or not knowing all the ways. I think for me, I find myself, especially when I work with young Black girls now, it's like, this is how I did it. You all are in a completely different atmosphere, society. There's 1,000 other ways to do whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. But here's how I laid the foundation. I think I have the perk and benefit of being kind of that in between where I was pre technology, I was during, and so now I'm getting to witness those that are coming after me and how they advance it. And so I think just like you said, being able to say or look at, here's the mistakes that I made then. Here's how I don't want you to make those mistakes, but you're going to have to make them in order to grow, in order to keep moving, in order to continue the legacy.
Yeah. Yeah. You made a powerful comment about mistakes, right? There's there's one of the quotes that I love that says, if you're not making a mistake, you're not doing it right. Right. And and it's also owning that mistake, right? Sometimes we wait too long to own the mistake. We don't, and that's where true leadership shows up, when I'm able to say, I didn't get that right, right? Perfectionism is the enemy of everything, right? There's a difference between perfectionism and excellence. So, if we stay in that, what happens when we don't own those mistakes, right? If I like to think about the legs of legacy and giants, like you were mentioning about this bridge that we drive over, right? It's a similar concept. And I think about it as the bridge over troubled waters, right? We've got a fracture in that bridge. You just might, like you said, be in that troubled water, and so when we don't own that, there's a mistake, but then there's also a capacity, right? Like some of the bridges that we currently are driving over weren't built to hold this amount of capacity and weight that it's now holding. And we've got to think of innovation, and we've got to bring diverse voices to the table, so that we don't end up in that troubled water, figuratively and literally. So, moving into our next question, and we think about contributions of women, to legacy building, and specifically Black women. I like to say to people, listen, I don't care what you are, who you are, and where you came from. You are standing on the shoulders of a Black woman, period. Right? There is not one aspect of building and society and culture and people that exist today that did not have a contribution, of some kind, some manner, from Black women. Even when you look at human studies, culture is passed down through women, from the mother to their children, right? So, in celebrating Black voices this month, especially those of Black women, how have Black women played pivotal roles in legacy building, or what have been their contributions that have kind of influenced your journey? And I want you to push past that familiar space, right? We often can go to our mothers, our aunts, our grandmothers, and whatnot, but I want to push past that, and think even broader about just Black women in general, about how they've influenced you and how they've played a pivotal role in legacy building.
I like how you asked us to go further than kind of that, like, very near and dear and personal, especially coming from being raised by a single Black mom. It's easy for me to instantly just say, well, my mom's my role model. My mom is who identified what it is to be a Black woman, what it is to be a strong, independent Black woman, and how to keep going. But I think in that, I also appreciate how she did push me to look for those that influenced me outside of her. And I think someone that I often refer back to, her name is Miss Smith. She was my second grade teacher. And I went to a predominantly white elementary school and middle school, where I was the only Black girl all 3 years of middle school in my class, because I was the smart one. So I was in advanced classes. So appreciative of that, because I did get to have those experiences. But my second grade teacher, I tested out of some classes, and she was like, this isn't the school for you. And so I can only say thank you so many times, and just remember what it would have been like, or how different my life would have been had she not said, you need to go to a different school. and what that would have looked like and how that shaped my future now and who I am. So thinking about just her seeing something in me and being that person who seen something in a little Black girl in a predominantly white school and was able to push me to go forward. Because I could have stayed. It was easy. School was easy. So I think for me, it's like looking at those people outside of just family, outside of just my mom and my aunts and my grandmother and that kind of thing, and being able to truly be appreciative and thankful for those that don't come traditionally to us. And just trying to remember that I've had like a pivotal Black woman in all aspects of my life, educationally, personally, professionally, even when I'm in these predominantly white spaces, there's still always one. And I think that just speaks volume, even if their seniority or their power that they hold doesn't equate to some of those of other titles, but the power that they hold simply by being a Black woman. And when you show up, you command the room. Is something that I endear and hold near to my heart because I hear it often about me. And I know it doesn't necessarily always just come from watching my mom, because I also seen my mom when she was broken down or when she didn't want me to know that we were struggling. And her being that transparent to allow me to see it, but also allow me to venture out and find my own role models. My mentor, who, even when I tell her she's my mentor, I'll make reference whether I'm saying thank you or saying happy birthday, is a Black woman. And it just comes natural. And I think she doesn't realize the light that she exudes and how it comes out. And so it's nice to have Black women. And like you said, no matter who you are, where you're at, where you're coming from, where you're going, there is a Black woman behind, up under, lifting up, pulling in some capacity. So
Absolutely. Thank you.
I would say for me, the woman that I recently started celebrating, so I've known of her, and I'm referring to Fannie Lou Hamer. I've known of her for a really long time, but one of the things I started doing is celebrating other Black folks in history that we don't celebrate or we don't have a month for. For example, in January, we know who we celebrate in January. And then after that, we don't really have a day. Now we have Juneteenth, I understand that. So in June, we celebrate Juneteenth as well. And so what I started doing is every month, maybe not every month, most months celebrate a different person. So Fannie Lou Hamer, she died in March. So what I'm doing now, starting last year, I celebrate her in the month of March. And so she's the person that I'm thinking of right now, that we stand on her shoulders. If it were not for her resilience and the voting rights that she has really fought for over the years, many of us would not be, well, all of us would not be where we are now. And she didn't only fight for women, but she fought for everyone. And so I know for sure that the voting rights in this country, the fact that a lot of Black women are able to vote, or Black people in general are able to vote the way they vote, is really because she was able to say, you know what, no more. You can no longer prevent me from voting. You can no longer do these things to us. And so I just encourage you to look through Black history as we're thinking about, February is Black History Month, but also look at the rest of the year. Who else can you celebrate, right? And so I celebrate Fannie Lou Hamer in the month of March. I celebrate MLK this month. I know it's not an official holiday, but I find a day, I think it was the day either he died or at his birth. So I look at the person's birthday or the day they passed, and I celebrate that person. So I celebrate, this month is my month for Martin Luther King. In the month of May, I celebrate Bob Marley, because I'm from another island in the Caribbean. It's not Jamaica, but he represents everyone. I think in the month of October, I celebrate Marcus Garvey. So we have to find those giants that we stand on their shoulders and celebrate them, not waiting for someone else to say, well, here's the official date. And so we have to stand on their shoulders by also celebrating them on a monthly basis, or however we determine to celebrate them.
Yeah. Ooh, good. So, I mean, just in thinking about when Joya, when you were thinking about it, I was having a bit of trouble, like not thinking about a teacher a little bit there, but I thought about in my high school, there was a woman who her role and job was to kind of be like the bathroom monitor. And when I tell you wisdom upon wisdom upon wisdom upon wisdom, And sometimes we think about Black, this concept of giants as this complex thing. And it is complex and simple also in its nature. And one of the gifts she gave me as a giant, right, that I still use today, she told me, my hair was tore up, y'all, because I was struggling that day. I don't know what was going on, but when I got up that morning, it was bad, And if you know anything about a Black woman and her hair, that is the crown of glory, right? Jewel there. And so, when you're in high school, you're still trying to find your way and all the other stuff is going on. And so I didn't have a comb that day. And so I was in the bathroom trying to just see if I could figure it out. And she said, baby, if you got a plastic fork, you always got a comb. And to this day, I keep a plastic fork everywhere in my suitcase. I got one in my car, in the glove box. And every time I come up on the need for that, or even if I see someone else struggling and I get ready to share it, I remember where I got it from, right? And so it's those simple things, right? And somebody might say, so what? But like I was able to go back to class and hold my head up, right? And not be down and all that other stuff for that day. And I can think about Carol, when you were talking about, we kind of had discussed that before and I'd forgotten until you brought it back up, right? And so Nina Simone is one that I'm gonna make sure that I add into my list, like powerful music and poetry and just, one of my favorite quotes by her is, if the table that's you're at is no longer serving you, then get up. And so it's those things, and we don't always have to know the giant personally, right? But my curiosity for you all, for the women that you'd mentioned or women that you wanted to mention, do they know that you see them as a giant? And how do you honor their legacy?
For me, I think it's yes and no. I try to put intentionality behind, especially the woman that I call my mentor, in saying it. And so stating it just because she's in the education system, she's a school counselor. So that's like her normal day to day is like, how do I make a student feel better? Or how do I make this person be okay? Or how do I help home life? And so for me, being an adult, I try to tell her and thank her. I'm very, very, very intentional with thanking the people that I feel like need it and deserve it. I give credit where credit is due because I'm appreciative when people give it to me when I don't even realize that I deserve it or that I should be getting it, because it's second nature. I think as women and as Black women, we're the nurturers. So it just happens. Like, I want to make you feel okay. Like, you're sad. What's the matter? Or you're hungry. All right, let's eat, or whatever it is. And so I think for her, because her day to day is always constant, go, 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 I'm taking care of others. So I try to engage in ways that take her away from work. So if she's talking about going out of town or if she's looking for a trip, then I'm like, how do I see fit to where I can make it work so that I can just accompany her because she thought of me as somebody to even go. So I think showing my gratitude in that way and meeting people where they're at with their love languages. And so often we look at love languages as forms of intimacy with those kind of relationships, but it's very, very important and heavy in friendship. And so not everyone receives love the same way. And so I know for her and for me, which is why we click so much, is because showing up for me means a lot. And so I try to show up in any capacity, whether it's a birthday, whether, like I said, if it's a trip that she's taken or that I've been invited to. And I know that she receives it in the way that I give it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joya. Let me just start by saying I have a fork. I'm just going to go ahead and put it in my bag now because you just never know we're going to need it. And for you ladies, just in case you don't got no Vaseline, I do. I got Vaseline in my bag always Vaseline, okay? So you should go ahead and add whatever you need to add to your bag. As Beyonce would say, swag, you know what I mean? So go ahead and add it now. So I'm going to go ahead and add the fork. I'm in complete agreement with everything you said, Joya. I'm very intentional and transparent with the folks that I know because words matter. Because oftentimes what happens is we say people are giants, we say how much we love them. We may say it publicly, but not to them. And I think it's important that our mentors know, the folks who have coached us over the years, know that we believe in them. So for me, for example, my mother, she's very aware that I see her as a giant because I have written about her in my book. I had a book tour, I would say fall of 2022 in New York City. She was there and I uplifted her right there in the audience. So everybody knows when I was down and out, it was my mother who took me to where I needed to be, as well as my mentor, one of my mentors who was also in the room. And so, yes, so I do agree that that we should uplift them and that they do absolutely know. And you talked about love languages, and I was just looking at this last night, and everybody's love language is different. For me, it's words of affirmation. For somebody else, it's something else. And we just have to figure out what that is for that person. I know for my mother, words of affirmation, she's just like, that's cute, but that's not going to do it for me. Your actions speak louder than words. So I know for my mom, it's really the action. For another mentor, it's really the words of affirmation. That's what it is. So thank you for bringing that up, Joy. Yeah.
It's we could go on and on and on, and I'm so excited and moved. But just as we kind of move to this next question, right? Like these incredible stories and tributes to the powerful influence that Black women have on our lives and legacies, right? Like they can't be denied. And lifting up those voices is so important, and lifting up like what I like to call the voices from the field, right? That's why I always tell the story about the beautiful woman. I wish I could remember her name. I can see her face, and I do remember her having an accent which would lead me to believe she was an immigrant possibly, but I can't fully remember at the time, but just uplifting her story for the gift that she gave. And I don't think I even realized it early enough to go back and tell her, but I keep telling the story because I think it's important. And so, it lights our way in our pathway. And so, but this work of legacy landscaping and legacy building, and it's tough. It's tough. It's difficult. It's eyeball scratching. It's rough, right? And so, we're witnessing, part of what I'm witnessing, and I think others are as well, is like this creation of these new platforms, right? And these voices emerging within our community, which is beautiful, right? But I want to kind of talk about what's the impact of that shift, right? What's the impact of that collective dynamic that's happening, where we're seeing these new platforms, or I like to call them these new tables, right? And people are even naming them, oh, this the new table of whatever, right? And and not so much it's a younger generation creating new tables, because that's happening as well. But I want to kind of look at it from the lens of what happens when a person who is the legs of the legacy doesn't shift at the right time or the appropriate time into being the giant, right? So, for example, it's awards time, right? Especially in the Black community, it's Black History Month, so it's awards time, and we see the same people getting the same award over and over and over and over again, as if they shared the cost and didn't have to reprint names. Or I often ask this question, like, we have Black leaders, but our Black leaders are aging, right? And why is that? Why are we still looking to ask Jesse Jackson in his 70s to come do something? That kind of thing. Or when you look around in different organizations, different communities, different projects, different whatever, and you notice that everybody at that table or in that group is over the age of 60. Everyone, or the cliche saying, this is how you know you're in a room where stuckness is happening. Well, that's the way we've always done it. Oh my gosh, I want to run, like just scream in terror. That is like, if you want me to watch a scary movie, put that on the title. I'm gonna be terrified, because that right there is like driving folks crazy. So when you think about this bridge, there's a need for the tension. But what happens when it's too strained, right? And so, like, how do we ensure this timely transition into becoming giants?
I think it's cultural why there's a hold up or hold off. Because can you imagine saying that you're a giant in front of your mother? I think because it's a cultural thing, we're waiting for the giants to anoint us to say, okay, go ahead.
Mhm.
And I don't know if they will ever do that while they're alive. But if we start to think of sustainability, we have to begin having those conversations. First, the conversation with the giants to say, okay, you have done everything you can, you have done it all. We shouldn't have to wait for them to pass along and transition from this world to have the conversation and say, okay, who would you like to pass the baton to? It doesn't have to be me. I'm saying we need to begin the conversation and say, okay, it ain't you, Carol, but it's going to be Joya. Okay, I'm glad that you say it's Joya. So at least now we know who to look to. And I think we wait too long to have those conversations because we are waiting to either be anointed or appointed and not realizing that we can go ahead and begin the conversation. I think that's just where we are. I think there's a cultural piece because it's very difficult to say I'm the giant in the room or I'm the next giant and Jesse Jackson sitting there. It's very difficult to do that.
Right now in our communities, absolutely. Even if he wasn't in the room.
And I think it's on that same note as the legs to be receptive that we're already the giant. Um, for me, it's kind of that opposite. My mom, she's the one to where now she's like, I hope you're getting like your recipes ready because when your grandmother passes, like you're who's cooking for whatever it is, or you're now over X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, well, you just skipped the generation. Like you're still like, how did we get to me already? And she's like, yeah, because it's your turn. She was like, you already possess it. And so I think as the giant, like you said, as a legacy, or a leg of a legacy, being able to be willing and receptive to take that in, to take that responsibility, and to be confident in it. And so the conversations I have with my mom and my grandmother are already speaking of like what I've done better than them or why they work so hard so that I can take over whatever it may be, whether it's like I said, the recipes or whether it's taking care of such and such or making the plans for this. Um, I think I'm lucky, very lucky and very blessed to have like the women behind me and the giants behind me, um, to see that in me and seen it early and to already kind of instill that. Like I came up wanting to learn how to cook or being the host of the family gathering or making the plans for the vacation or whatever that may be. So I think, like you said, it is culturally being able to do it without being appointed, but then also on the opposite end, being receptive to where like, no, we're already the giants. It may be a different generation, it may be a different task, or ability that we possess, but it's like we got to hone in on that and push forward to do it. And then I think speaking into the next generation or those that come after us to already be looking like, hey, I've learned how to do this. I'm already in place for this. So when this happens, now you're in charge, whether it's the same timeline or same topic of things that I'm leading or spearheading. How do we bring you in so that you can learn and keep it moving?
What do you all think about this emergence of all these new tables? What do you think about that impact, right? Like I'm seeing, just if I use it in a cliche manner, right? A lot of young people saying, all right, we can't get in. You won't even let me. I done brought my own chair. You still won't let me speak. You still won't let me. So guess what? We're gonna leave y'all here and we're gonna make our own table. And now there's like this concentrated number. So what do you think about the emergence of all these new tables?
I think it's necessary,
Mm.
for that reason, because even with like job applications, they tell you X amount of years of experience required. I'm like, well, how do I get the experience if you don't allow me to come and learn and grow? And now I can sustain or keep the company growing or become innovative because I have a new and fresh idea. So I work in a school setting. So I like when the kids are given a task and they're like, yeah, but I don't like how we did it that way. Or I'm not a fan of that project, but here's what I came up with. And it meets all the criteria of whatever it is on the checklist or the requirements, but they came up with it in their own way. And so then you're able to present it like, hey, here's what you thought of, and this has been working for you for however long, but now look at what they've created. Look at what they've done. So how do we empower? That's why I said in the beginning, I've been in youth development. I'm big, very, very passionate on youth development and what's to come. And I think they are the future. We are the future, and the only way that they can keep going is to feel empowered. So
Dang,
I'm a
Julie,
fan
you
of
just
it.
left me like me and Carol, we ain't with you or something.
Y'all right,
But I
y'all
was still
right.
in here.
Y'all right, y'all right. But like I said, for us to keep going, I do. I'm a fan of it. I think it's needed for sure. Even with like, what was it identified as, the silent quitters? And I was like, as long as I've been trying to quit whatever job I was in, they just did it. Like there was no, I've been trying to leave this job for however long, and they was like, yeah, we didn't even tell them. We just got a new job. It's like, oh, or they just stuck to whatever their boundaries were of their job, and so it was like, wow, that makes sense. You done taught me something. I done set a boundary, and here I am trying to teach you how to set boundaries. So I like it. I'm a fan.
Yeah. How about you, Carol? What you think?
I wasn't as familiar with the term tabling until you said it just now, but given the explanation, I certainly get it and understand. I think it is necessary. However, I'm going to put a caveat in there. We have to really keep in mind that they're able to quit things easily because they have a safety net. Okay. So many of the folks we are talking about, not that I have any one specific person in mind, they are not necessarily living on their own, paying their own bills and so forth. So they can say, oh, I'm living with a roommate. My roommate gonna have the rent for the next 6 months because we talked to her or him or whomever about it. I'm with my boo. I'm with my parent. I'm with whomever. So it's easier. It can be a little bit easier to say, okay, I'm gonna quiet quit because you have this safety net. But I do believe it's absolutely necessary because we can't keep doing the things that we're doing because it's not working. Isn't there something that says if you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, we just can't.
That's
Right?
the
We
definition of
cannot.
insanity.
That's right. That's right. We cannot continue to do that. And I do love the example that Joya gave about you're saying you need 5 to 7 years of experience, but no one is letting me get the experience so I can get the experience. So something has to give. I think we need to reimagine and re-envision how we do things, how people are going to get experience for a job. And if we don't listen to the folks who are tabling or whatever they're calling it right now, we're doomed to fail. We really are.
We are. Do you think so? What do we do now? Right? What's the next step? Right? Like, in how is all of the new tables impacting legacy building in the Black community? How are all of the, I don't know, old tables, right? Like, how is this dynamic impacting our ability to legacy build? And what's the possible solution, or what's the next step? Right? If you think about it now, we've all got our different communities that we're part of, right? And we're either sitting in a room, we're like, ooh, are they gonna all like retire or die at the same time? Because this doesn't make any sense. Or are we, all at a room, like we've been in these different spaces. And so what's the way forward? What's an action you're gonna maybe take? I hope it's not a maybe, but what's an action you're thinking about taking? Because I always think about this question: what can we create together that we cannot do alone? I love the silence because that's what Uncommon Conversations is about. You got to think deep, dig deep, beyond the surface level.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I genuinely don't know sitting here. The two words that came to mind for me are community and movement. But there's so many movements happening. I know there's a lot going on in community, but what kind of community can we, even if we're not growing it and establishing, from the root up, is there something that we can become a part of to make an impact? That's what I don't know, because there's so many things already out there, but I don't know which one to say, this is it. This is the movement that we need to be a part of. Because, the thing is, movements fizzle if you're not very careful. They fizzle over time. The giants, going back to what you said, the giants kind of fall off, or they pass away, or they transition, or the Giants just get tired.
Yeah.
Right? They've been on the road for 40 years. They've been fighting this fight for 45 years, and nothing seems to change systemically. So
Yeah.
they're like, okay, let me go ahead and fall back and let somebody else do this. So it's very difficult for me to say. I don't really know. I don't know the answer to that.
That's real.
Yeah, I like what you brought up also, and I would say along with community for sure, because we are the Black community, but not all the time are we a community. So I would say a sense of trust has got to be there. And I think I like how you question, like, what are you going to do to build it or to establish it? And so I think people have to actively say, what am I going to do? It's easy for me to say the group is gonna, or we decided to. So in that, Joy is going to X, Y, and Z. And so for me, it's hard because it's like, well, I'm already dealing with all the things that I personally have to deal with on top of now you want me to worry about how to carry so-and-so's issues or concerns or whatever it may be with me. And that's hard. And I think even being transparent in that and saying, like Carol said, I don't know. But being willing to either figure it out or be in the rooms to do so. Even like this, never in a million years would I think that I would be having an uncommon conversation past the ones that I have with my inner circle. So I think being able to step up to a challenge, both personally, professionally, and whatever that may look like. But trust for sure, and I like community, and figuring out what the movement is, or being okay with not knowing, and how do we pivot and keep going to see how do we figure out, or how do we learn, or how do we do know what it is.
And I think in addition to, even if we don't know or can't figure it out, whatever it turns out to be, hopefully sooner than later, that I really want us to protect our peace in the process, because these movements are not easy. No one said it was easy, right? I mean, I'm going back to Fannie Lou Hamer. We know it wasn't easy for her. It wasn't easy for Nina Simone. It wasn't easy for my mother or your mother, Joya. But I think sometimes in the process, we lose our peace. And we just can't afford to lose our peace right now.
Yeah, I mean, I even want to push you to think like, Joy, you were saying, what did you say? Sorry, it's coming back to me. Hold on. There it goes. You were saying that, I can't add another thing, but I wonder what we might already be doing, right? I'm in the belief that it's happening. We just need to pivot, right? Some of us need to pivot. Some of us need to just move over. Some of us need to turn around, right? And maybe tap the person next to us like, you facing the wrong way, right? And I wonder if there are things we're already doing that are contributing, and how, and maybe this is just an expansion of that before we take on something new, right? So, like essentially we're kind of discussing power sharing, right? And this is a practice that, Carol, to your point, this anointing, that's power sharing. We don't do it. We don't even talk about it well. I think when I became a chief, one of the startling things that I came across was, even before when I went for my coronation, was I had to be the chief with my parents in the room. Right. And I was like, how, right. And then to like come back, into places and spaces, and it was, these different dynamics, but just trying to figure out, if we can figure out how to have the conversations in the family space, because we're having them in the work and the community space, right? Sometimes they sound like succession planning, but we're afraid to have some of these conversations in places. But I do still wonder if it's possible to just begin the dialogues within what we already are doing.
I suppose, but I still don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
I really have to think about this one. I really do.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy to find our way, right? And I think that's why Someone told me once before that never make a decision without 4 generations present. And I was like, Do you know what it's like trying to schedule with some of these people? Can't even get my Carol, you're muted.
No, I was just thinking about what you said about 4 generations present. That's pretty powerful by itself.
Mhm.
That's it right there. Maybe
Yeah.
that's where we start. Maybe
And
that's
they
the
don't have
starting
to be
point.
related to you.
That's right. That's right.
Sometimes we're like, well, I don't have that representation. You do. You have to give up the need for it to be someone that's connected to you in that manner. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we are so easy, at least in this country, discarding of our elders. And
Mm.
so that would be powerful to see, folks who are in their 80s or whatever, could be our grandparents, or, they're still around. They have stuff to contribute, but we just haven't tapped into them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. How about you, Joya? What are you thinking?
I know I'm stumped on this one. That's hard. That's hard.
Mhm.
Um, I think it just goes back to that transparency and trust. Like, even if you say the generations don't have to be your direct generation, but being able to trust that somebody else has an answer, whether it's the one I was expecting, the one I wanted, but there's an answer in their responses or in their lived experiences. Um, I don't know. You gotta have like a part 2 for us to come back with all the answers to the questions that
Oh yeah, all the answers, right? But I mean,
all
I
of
think
them.
that's the power of conversation, right? I think one of the things we have to get comfortable with is not knowing and it not being done all the time, and it being messy. It's a journey, right? And so it's going to be messy. Sometimes we're going to leave and it's not complete, but it's complete for now, or it's good enough for now, or we don't know. And that's the beauty that we don't know. We don't have to know everything. And so I'm so grateful to have this conversation with you all, and I'm just my cup is full again, right? And so your reflections and experiences that you shared today, they provide so much to ponder, right? Not only for ourselves but for others. As I think somebody older than me, I don't know who it was now because I can't remember, right? Um, chew the fat, right? It gives us something to chew on and ponder about for this ongoing journey of legacy building, specifically in the Black community. So, as we draw our conversation to a close, I'm really reminded about the strength and resilience and curiosity that define our collective journey. And so, I just want to give you an opportunity to share some final thoughts as we get ready to wrap up.
My final thought is, thank you for, of course, in the invitation, but also thank you for the fork analogy. I know it's supposed to be hair related, but I also think of the things we carry,
Mhm.
right? What are we carrying around with us in our bags, in our whatever, not too much load. As you remember, I think it was, oh, what's the singer who sang, who has a song about Bag Lady? Oh gosh,
Erica Badu.
Erykah Badu. So making sure our bags are not too heavy, but what do we actually have in our bags that we're carrying? I talked about Vaseline, for protection. It's a nice lotion. It keeps you moisturized, and some other things down
Mhm.
the road.
Mhm.
We know what the fork is going to be used for. So I think as we're thinking about legacy building, what are we carrying with us that we can pass along? Because you dropped the jewel about this fork, and I'm like, man, I can now tell somebody else. So sometimes we get information and we don't pass it along. And that's part of legacy, is passing things along. And you're creating your own legacy. I know it's only a fork. I know it sounds very simple, but it's what we're doing with the information that we have and how are we passing along to our next. And it's so great to meet you, Joy. You dropped a lot of jewels today, so I really appreciate you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. And on that same note, thank you, Chief, for inviting me, for thinking of me for me to make sense in this space. I'm appreciative in more ways than one. And I think just all of these conversations or the topics that we talked about, just being able to trust those that come before and after us, and specifically to like Black women and little Black girls to know a quote that's resonating with me is by Ayanna Presley. And so she said, "My mama didn't raise me to ask for permission to lead." And so I think walking in and knowing that your presence as a Black girl, as a Black woman, you're going to command the room regardless of how you see fit or how you may think you do. So being okay with asking for forgiveness later.
Oh, cool. I'm so grateful. In Dagbani, we would say Tikpaya Pum, which means we are grateful to God. And so I just want to say thank you to both of you for being an incredible panel today, about as Black legacy architects, right? For sharing your wisdom, your experiences, your lived experiences, your curiosities, and your truth with us today. Your voices are instrumental, not echoes, but instrumental in shaping the future of Black legacy in our communities. And to our audience that has joined us, thank you so much for joining us for another Uncommon Conversation. We hope you found this inspirational, insightful, and that it resonates with you on your journey, because we all have the capacity to contribute as architects in our legacy. And so it's been my pleasure to be your guide and host in this discussion. Stay inspired, stay connected, keep building, because it's about our future, and it's about what we stand on. And until next time, I want to leave you with this uncommon question. The future is calling. What must you say no to now in order to say yes to that future? Until next time.